In the last few years, we bought three properties, and now we earn about 75,000 pesos per month in rental income. And no, we did not win the lottery, and no, we don't have businesses that take flood control projects. In this video, we'll break down how we did all of that. So stick around and subscribe to this channel if you want to learn more financial independence and investment principles. As you watch this video and you go through it, I hope that you don't treat this as a real estate course. And also, quick disclaimer, I'm not a broker, I'm not a financial planner. I'm just someone who's sharing their specific decisions and how that affected us. And hopefully, you can learn a thing or two from both our mistakes and our wins as well. There are so many misconceptions when it comes to property investing in the Philippines. And if we believed every piece of advice that people gave us, there's a high chance that we would have never been able to build the property portfolio that we have today. And that's the reason why I'm making this video, because I want to break a lot of these myths for you so that you can start your financial independence journey through properties if that feels like after watching this video that that's the goal or like the path for you. So for those of you who are landing in this channel for the first time, just a quick introduction. My name is Patrick Mabilog. My friends call me Kiko. I'm an entrepreneur, investor, and a Lord of the Rings fan. I've gotten into debt multiple times, but somehow we found a way to start a really successful business and build a really good investment portfolio, even at the age of 35. So let me tell you our investment journey when it came to our properties. We bought our first home back in 2016. It was a three-bedroom house, and then we lived in it until 2019 when we decided that we would move out of our hometown of Iloilo to Bacolod City. Right now, it's valued at 5 million pesos and it's earning about 20,000 pesos per month in rental income. Because when we moved out of that house and moved to a different city, the decision for us was not to sell the property, but to turn it into a rental. And that was one of the best decisions that we ever made. And then fast forward around 2022, we bought a second house in Bacolod City, the city that we now live in. Specifically, we live in Talisay, which is a bit north of the city. And we've been living in this house for quite some time now. So 2022, we purchased this property. And the value now is 6.5 million pesos. And we don't earn any rental from this because this is the house that we live in right now. And then in 2024, 2 years after we bought this property, we added a one-bedroom condo. And we bought this at a value of 7 million pesos and decided to convert it into an Airbnb. The earnings on that can go between 30,000 to 55,000 pesos per month. And we keep our property management costs very lean. And so the net is quite solid for us. So when it comes to real estate property, and a couple of the myths that I heard very early on that we eventually debunked over time were these three. So the first one is that you need a lot of money to buy multiple properties. Now, I guess like when you hear that, it kind of sounds like, of course you do. And yes, you do need a lot of money, but you don't really need as much as most people think. You don't need like millions of pesos. And I think the reason why we believe that is because we think that if you buy property, that you have to pay in cash or you have to don't buy like two properties at the same time. But that's not been our experience, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit. The second myth that I hear is that home loans are the devil or that they're bad, right? And I think that comes from the overall like ecosystem of how our loans actually work in the Philippines. And we'll dive down deeper into that a little bit and kind of hopefully debunk that myth as well. And the last myth that I hear is that rentals are a hassle. And I see this all the time. People who, on social media talk about how, rental properties are a nightmare. And yes, there are some aspects of it that can be hard, but I like to think that the people who believe that rental properties are a hassle are people who don't have systems or don't have the right systems in place. But if you do have the right systems in place, then it can be quite semi-passive, not completely passive, but it can be, income that is not tied to your direct labor. So one question that we get asked a lot when choosing a rental property is it better for you to take a long-term or a short-term rental property? So we've actually built both, and we've kind of like in the process understood the pros and cons and like the things that really go into building a long-term rental property and a short-term rental property. So these are the things that we kind of noticed in our personal experience, right? So a couple of factors that you want to start off with that will help you to really determine what kind of property rental you want to start. And these factors are important because, well, I mean, when it comes to whether you start a short term or long term rental property, the answer will always be it depends on these three factors. So the three factors that you want to look at are utilization. Do you want to use the property, or are you going to just completely turn it into a rental? Second is your financial goal. Are you planning to make active or passive income? And lastly is what's your capacity like in terms of time and focus and attention? Do you want a property that takes less of your time, or do you want something that you can be a bit more active with? So what are the the scenarios that come out here when it comes to these three factors between long-term and short-term rental properties? So for long-term rental properties, utilization wise, you can't use the property at least when it's rented out, because you can't tell your long-term tenant, hey, can I live in your guest room when I'm visiting or I'm in town? Can't do that. It's kind of weird, right? And you can't tell them to vacate if you want to use the property, for long periods of time or even for short periods of time. And if you did ask them to leave, then you probably will lose a tenant and you'll have a hard time finding a new one. And that's the case. But like with short-term rental properties, you can still use it because you can just block off calendar dates that you want to use that property. So in our setting, for example, the Airbnb unit that we have is in our hometown of Iloilo City. And so when we visit family there, we don't get hotels anymore. We just look at the Airbnb calendar and we say, oh, these dates are available, so let's block them off so that no one will book them. So we can use them, right? And normally when we come in, it's already fully furnished. You have all of the utensils because your guests are using that as well. The next thing we want to look at for goals for long-term rental properties, the financial goal that fits this kind of property better is more passive. So again, semi-passive, right? But like relatively to short-term rentals, a long-term rental property will take less effort when it comes to like generating revenue, because someone moves in, they furnish the house themselves, or if it's semi-furnished, they put in their own furniture, they pay for their own bills. You will probably have to take care of major renovations and fixtures, but like for the minor ones, like changing light bulbs and things like that, that's normally the job of your tenant. With a short-term rental property, however, your financial goal, you actually have a bit more of an active role in the business because you have to market, you have to take care of guests, you have to onboard them, you have to make sure that the property is cleaned. However, the big upside here with short-term rental properties is if you know how to market the property well and you know how to take care of guests and all of that, then you could actually end up getting a higher active income, because now your income is a bit more directly affected by the level of skill that you have in terms of using that short-term rental to generate revenue. So those are the two big differences when it comes to your financial goal. Now, in terms of capacity, when you have a long-term rental, then that long-term rental will probably take less work, because once again, you don't have to fix the all of the small minor details yourself. You'll probably hear from your tenant once or twice every month when you're collecting rent, and maybe one small issue here and there, right? But with short-term rentals, you need a bit more involvement, and it's going to take a little bit more work because you have to set up the listings, you have to market it, you have to probably maintain some marketing channel that you can promote online, those kinds of things. And so a lot of that is my wife now, because she has the time and the capacity to do that, because she is in a level where her involvement in our other active businesses aren't as high anymore. So but if you are someone who is a bit more busy, so if you have a full-time job or you have a business that you're heavily involved in, then having a short-term rental unit might be too much work for you, and it could lead to burnout. You might work unnecessarily long hours. So those are the things that you need to look at. And once again, when choosing your rental path, then it really depends, right? So you want to kind of like take a look at these three factors and make decisions accordingly. So how do you build a property portfolio like we have, the three properties that we have, right? In our experience, I mean, we're not masters when it comes to property investment. I know of people who have way more properties than us, but like we've kind of like pick up a couple of things that hopefully I can teach you if you're kind of like starting off or you don't have three properties yet. Now, I want to talk about how we build that portfolio. And the investment strategy that we use was something that we call the property chain. And the idea is quite simple. Each property that you own will either earn money or free up money. And so you use that to start the next link in the chain and purchase another property. Now, it sounds pretty obvious, but it almost never gets done because of maybe a level of fear that we have that, oh, I'm going to have to juggle two mortgages. Or what if, you don't have a tenant, and then, you're going to have to end up paying for two properties that are not making any money, right? So one thing that really helped us to develop this property chain is something called an investment flywheel. And I talked about this in another video, so I'll give a quick summary. And if you want to learn more about that investment flywheel, I'll link the video somewhere here if you want to get a deeper dive. But essentially, what we've done is with the first property, when that started turning into rental income, we invested that income into ETFs, and then from the ETFs, basically that kind of accumulated over time. We did not spend that money. We did not turn it into luxuries or vacations and all of that. We used it to buy another property. And after we bought that next property, we still continue to get rental income from the first property. And then we built that up once again. And within 2 years' time, we bought a third property. And now the third property, the income from there, the net income, we're not spending it still. We're putting it in more investment. So that's kind of how you have an investment flywheel. So if you want to check that out, then go make sure that you watch that other video. And I'll put it in the description as well if you want to check it out. After you have your investment flywheel, building your property chain, the next question that people ask us all the time is, so how do you like operate the rental? How do you take tenants like from here and there? How do you collect rent and all of these things? And so what you're actually asking is, you're asking the question, what does your rental system look like? And I would argue that this is probably one of the most important factors to determine whether you're going to have a successful investment property portfolio or not. Because without the rental system, going back to the one of the myths that I discussed earlier, then your rental units will become a headache, right? You're going to be stressed with a lot of fixing, maintenance, and you probably have tenants who are missing payments, and it's just going to cause more problems than you have solutions for. So when you're building your rental system, the three non-negotiables that you want to figure out first, and I can only give you like all of this in like surface level. I'll probably talk about them in deeper levels in future videos. But the three non-negotiables that you want to start with, number one is you want to start with a property manager. Now, when it comes to building passive income, one question or one concern that I see a lot of that I see with a lot of people is they're unwilling to hire additional help, and they just want to do everything themselves. They want to clean the Airbnb themselves. They want to talk to the tenants themselves. It's a lot of work, right? And so if you're going to do it that way, then you're just going to have a full-time job. But if you have a property manager, you can kind of like free up your time. So you're buying back your time and allowing the rentals to pay for your property manager's salary. Now, for our two rental properties, for example, they're in a different city. So they're both in Bacolod, I mean in Iloilo rather, and we live in Bacolod. And we need someone on the ground to check on the unit, to buy supplies for our Airbnb, to go to the tenant in our long-term rental if there are any problems. And we think that that's kind of like a waste of money, but actually what you're doing is you're buying back your time. You're building an extension of yourself, and it's worth every peso because your property manager can handle the viewings, can handle minor repairs, and even monthly check-ins with your long-term rental property like tenants, right? And so when it comes to hiring a property manager, couple of things. Number one, you don't always have to hire someone full time. You can find someone who is looking for a part-time gig, because like in essence, really, with at least in our case, for example, if you have two rental properties, that's not a 40-hour a week job, right? That's probably 5 hours to maybe like 7 hours. So if we're paying someone like a part-time rate, we're paying for 20 hours but only asking for 10. kind of sounds like a good deal for them still. So like in our scenario, for example, we've hired people who have like full-time jobs and are looking for extra income, or students who are quite reliable and who can, who also want like the training in some form or another. We pay them actually really well. We still pay them like the minimum wage in the city, even though they're getting a part-time rate. The second thing that you want to build as a non-negotiable is your tenant screening. And so it's important for me to really pound this, right? How crucial it is to be very selective with the tenants that you have. And I see this, a lot with property owners who are using their properties for rentals, where they kind of like drop the rate because they're always in a rush to like get their property occupied as soon as possible. In our case, when we do have a tenant that vacates the property, we always give it about 2 to 3 months because you want to be selective with your tenants, right? And so, like, you'll have tenants who will have a lot of demands, and they'll probably try to haggle the rate. Just, a quick rule of thumb, it's not always the case, but over the years, we've kind of like figured out like those are really big red flags when it comes to tenants. And you end up having to chase them a whole lot just to get them to pay rent on time. Or they might probably leave the property and it's going to be in a really bad position because not only can't they afford the rental, or they're going to have a hard time paying for the rental, but when there are minor repairs, they can't make those repairs because they don't have the budget to do it. So you want to choose your tenants well. So our process normally includes things like income verification, references, initial payment terms. We always make sure that we have a notarized contract so that we attract the people who go and say, yes, we will follow the contract to the letter because it's legally binding. So choosing the right tenant upfront is the single highest leverage thing that you can do as a landlord. Because if you find the right tenant, that tenant will stay with you for 2 to 3 years. And if they vacate, then you have another 1 to 2 months to find another one. But the question that I get asked a lot is like, what do you do with the 2 to 3 months then that you don't have a tenant? That's why it's very important for you as well. The third thing, to build a financial buffer. So in our case, for example, because all our properties, the rentals, anyways, they're still on mortgages. We always make sure that we have at least 6 months of mortgage payments sitting in an emergency fund. That's non-negotiable for us because if a tenant leaves unexpectedly, or if a big repair comes up, we're not scrambling for cash. The property doesn't become a source of stress. Instead, it stays as a clean source of income. So that's what you want to have set up before you even think about putting out your property for rent. So, last question that I want to answer here is the question between, is it better to buy a property on a loan, or is it better to pay the property in cash? Now, once again, just like the short term and long term versus long term conversation, the answer here is that it really depends. But in our case, we have actually found a good level of success in accumulating properties using loans, and we call it leverage accumulation. And that might sound quite complicated and social, but it's actually not, because the idea is simply this, right? If you have 3 million pesos, you can either buy one house in cash, or you can use the 3 million pesos, split it up into two down payments on two properties, and use the bank's money to pay for the rest. There's this deeply ingrained belief in Filipino culture that debt is bad, that utang can become stressful. And I get it, because there's a difference between consumer debt and business debt, and we're not really taught the difference between the two. A consumer debt will go to lifestyle expenses, right? New car, better phone, shopping for luxury items or items that could be more expensive that you want, Shopee Pay, and all of these things, right? That's consumer debt. You use that debt to consume something, it's not going to generate anything for you. But if you have an asset-backed debt that generates income greater than the interest that you're paying, then it's not going to drain you. In fact, it's going to help build for you. So when we're buying a property, the first thing that we look at is how much can we loan, where the loan can still kind of be covered by the revenue that this property is going to make. And if we can do that, then there's a high chance that we could start this business, right? So your salary now is no longer the engine. Instead, the asset, the portfolio, the property that you're buying will become the engine for you. So in our scenario, for example, when we bought the third property that we have, which is the condo unit, we were looking at it, and like the hot take for people was, you already have a rental property and you have a house that you're living in, and those are still on loans. Don't get another loan. And when we asked those people why we shouldn't get a loan, and if there was like a certain math or calculation behind it, they didn't really have an answer. They just told me, basta wag ka nang kumuha ng loan kasi ang dami ng loans, baka masakit sa ulo. But the numbers, I really believe, should speak for themselves. So in my normal like style, which you've seen probably in my other videos if you've been following me for a while, I crunched the numbers. And I found out that if I had to wait for a property to for me to afford that property in cash, then I was actually going to lose money. Because that's what people were saying. Oh, just wait another 10 years, you'll finish the other two loans, or you probably have enough cash to buy another property, this time in cash. But if I waited that long, a couple of things that I needed to put into consideration. Number one, the property growth in Iloilo City amongst condos were 5 to 10% per year. And that's like the historical figures I was looking at. I was looking at the properties that were available 5 years ago. And then I looked at the property now, and I was like, wow, it's actually increased 5 to 10% every single year. And by the time, if we waited another 10 months or 10 years rather to buy another property, by the time that we saved enough for this condo unit, then the condo unit would have probably been around 3 to 5 million pesos more. So yes, we were not going to pay interest on that loan, but the property increase over time we would not be able to catch up with it. And then secondly, is I realized that if by saving money over the next 10 years, that would mean that we were going to earn zero Airbnb income. And so right now, the property, once again, is earning 30 to 55,000 pesos a month. And so that's around 5 to 8 million pesos in cash flow that we would not earn for 10 years if we did not get it right now. And the interest that we were trying to avoid in those 10 years was 3 million pesos. So we would have probably lost anywhere between 8 to 11 million pesos in that time frame just to save 3 million pesos in interest. So the math speaks for itself. So once again, this is our scenario. Again, just our scenario. I'm not saying that it's always better to get a loan. But what I'm saying is you have to do your math. And if you're here and you're watching this and you're saying, I don't like math. Well, guess what? I mean, I'm allergic to math as well. But if I look at this and I say I want to do this right, then I want to make sure that the numbers make sense as well. I'm not going to compute the numbers all the time, but like in cases like this where it really matters and the decision could be make or break, then I need to make sure that the math kind of like pans out. And the last thing that you want to look at, however, when you are planning to get a loan on a property, is something called your debt to income ratio, or DTI ratio. It's this number that shows the amount of money that you can loan from the bank and how much of a percentage that is of your current monthly income. So let's say, for example, that you have an income of 50,000 pesos and you're planning to get a loan worth 12,000 pesos. So 12,000 pesos, divided by 50,000, that would be around, ang hirap ng math. Kita mo na nga, hindi nga ako magaling sa math eh. 12 divided by 50 is 24%, right? So your debt to income ratio is 24% or 25%, right? So that's about 1:4. So one part one part loan is 4 parts of your monthly income. Now, if you look at the numbers, a good debt to income ratio, universally for property purchase, is generally considered to be about 30 to 35% or lower, right? So if you're earning 100,000, that means that you can get a loan of 30 to 35,000. So if you have a property right now that's worth 10,000 and you want to get another property that you can turn into a rental, then you have about 15,000 pesos per month in additional mortgage cap space. Now, of course, when you're buying a property, by the way, you want to make sure that you can pay as much of a down payment as you can like in our case, for example, we always make a minimum, a very solid minimum of 20%. 20%, because like normally the bank will only loan you 80% anyway. So you want to make sure that you have the 20% for your equity before you make the house purchase. Don't take out a loan to pay out for your equity, because then you're going to have a mortgage on the 80% and another loan on the 20%, and that's going to be so hard, my friends. So overall, if you look at our property stack, we have three properties, one house, uh, that's earning 20,000 pesos on a 7,500 mortgage. We have the house that we're living in right now. The mortgage is around 38,000 pesos. We're not earning revenue because that's the house that we're living in right now. That's where I'm shooting. And then the third one is the condo unit. Right now, it's still on the equity payment, which is about 18,000. That will go up to about 25 to 30,000 by the time that we start paying the 80%. But right now, that's earning around 30 to 55, let's just say 45,000 pesos. So if you look at the mortgage to the revenue that it's making, it kind of balances out, right? But once again, like I said, that revenue is going straight into investments for now. That might change in the next 1 to 2 years, once we do hit coast financial independence, which is coming up probably in the next 12 months or so. But once we do finish up all of those investments, if you want to learn about all my other investments, subscribe to the channel, check out the rest of the videos. I talk about our investments in ETFs, in property, in S&P 500, and so on and so forth. But just some final thoughts that I want to leave you with right here, right? So when it comes to property purchasing, the one thing that has really helped me to make the right decisions and help me and my wife, because we make the decisions together all the time, is always moving from a day-to-day thinking mindset to a decade-to-decade thinking mindset. I learned this from my mentor, Chingitan. Right? He told me one time, one of the most transformational things he told me, you have to move from short-term to long-term thinking. Meaning, if you're thinking day-to-day right now, how am I going to pay for, the mortgage, or maybe not day to day, but maybe like month to month. But I just say this day to day, right? You're always, every day's a new day when it comes to like deciding what to do with your rental properties. That's not a good place to be. And that's why you need things like your buffer, you need a system in place, you need a property manager that you can trust. Because what you want to do is move away from day to day to now going to decade, long term thinking. When my wife and I think about our property investments and all of our other investments, we're not thinking about what's going to happen next year. We're not thinking about what's going to happen in the next 5 years. We're thinking about what's going to happen in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Because 10, 20, 40 years from now, these properties, once the mortgages are done, all of the revenue that it's earning will now be net income that is going to go straight to our pockets as semi-passive income by the time that we choose to retire. And all of our mortgages will be done around the age of 50 years old. So that means that if we play our cards right and just make sure that we can cover the mortgages, that we can keep these properties in good condition and keep them occupied for a majority of the year with good tenants, then there's a high chance that these properties could become a good source of semi-passive income by the time that we retire. I hope that this video helped you if you are planning to make this move towards property investments. Once again, I want to make it very clear. This is our case. I want you to just take the principles out of that, apply it in your life. For the principles that don't apply, please be careful. Do your own research. You have your own mind. You have your own calculator. Do your own math as well. If you have any questions, you can always leave some comments in the comment section below. I try to answer all of them, or reach out to me. We could probably start a conversation around investments. And so that's it for today's video, and I'll see you next time around. Bye.